Millions of people watched it live. Trump leaned into the mic and said, "Sit down, boy." But Obama's quiet, razor-sharp comeback flipped the room and stunned even his critics. The cameras were already rolling at the Phoenix Convention Center, where a forum on race and leadership was meant to bring together a current and former president for thoughtful dialogue. That plan collapsed in an instant. Trump narrowed his eyes at Obama and dropped the line that would echo far beyond those walls. The audience gasped. The sound of shock rippled like air rushing out of a balloon. Thousands sat frozen, waiting for what came next. A pastor in the front row shook his head. A student 2 rows back muttered, "Did he just say that?" as he raised his phone to record. News cameras locked in, sensing history was unfolding. Trump leaned back, almost smug. His supporters laughed nervously, unsure whether to clap. Some smirked, others looked down. Across the hall, people were visibly furious. A woman in her 60s grabbed her necklace like she was steadying her pulse. Then came Obama. He didn't snap back or raise his voice. He leaned back slightly, rested, one hand on his lap, and straightened his jacket with the other. That single calm gesture spoke louder than words. It showed he was in control, unwilling to be dragged into a shouting match. For a few long seconds, he said nothing. The silence grew heavier, broken only by whispers. Is he going to respond? Reporters scrambled on their laptops, desperate to tweet out what they were witnessing. Even the moderator shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the 2 men like he was bracing for a crash. The cameras zoomed in, Trump's face tight with tension, Obama's calm and measured. "This will be everywhere by morning," whispered a woman to a councilman who only nodded, eyes locked on the stage. Sensing the silence wasn't helping him, Trump leaned forward again. "What? Did I say something wrong?" he asked, smirking, daring Obama to react. But Obama didn't move. He gave a faint half-smile, tilted his head slightly, and simply stared back. The crowd buzzed with uneasy murmurs. It was the kind of stare that said words, not volume, would decide the moment. Everyone knew something was coming, and the silence became almost unbearable. A Fox News analyst leaned over and whispered, "If he speaks, everything changes." All eyes stayed locked on Obama. Even Trump, drumming his fingers on the desk, couldn't escape the tension. The expectation in the room grew so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. What came next wasn't an outburst or a fight. It was sharper, calmer, and impossible to ignore. For nearly 10 seconds, silence gripped the entire convention center. It was the kind of silence that dries your throat and makes your palms sweat. The audience leaned forward instinctively, not wanting to miss a single detail. Obama reached for his glass of water, lifted it slowly, and took a deliberate sip. The sound of ice shifting in the glass echoed through the mic. When he set it down, the gesture felt almost ceremonial. That composure rattled Trump more than shouting ever could. He shifted again, tapping louder, scanning the crowd as if to remind them he was still in charge. "Why isn't he saying anything?" someone whispered. The reply came softly, "Because silence is louder right now." And it was true. Each second Obama stayed quiet, Trump lost more control. Reporters froze over their keyboards. Cameramen leaned closer. Even a boy in the audience tugged at his father's sleeve, asking, "What did he mean by boy?" His father, still staring at Obama, muttered, "You'll understand when you're older." Trump finally broke, his voice sharp with irritation. "What? No response? I thought you had something to say." He laughed, but the sound fell flat, scattering awkwardly through the hall. Then Obama moved. He placed both hands on the table, leaned slightly toward the mic, and looked at Trump with patience that cut deeper than anger. "I'll respond," he said softly. The words were simple, but the reaction was instant. Phones shot up, reporters scrambled back into action, and the crowd buzzed like a fuse had just been lit. Still, Obama didn't rush. He leaned back again, letting the weight of anticipation grow heavier. His calm refusal to match Trump's pace said everything. Students in the third row sat wide-eyed, whispering that he was about to cook him. The moderator, Professor Stokes, tried to step in, then stopped. He knew this was no longer his stage. The country was watching something raw, and all he could do was let it unfold. Trump adjusted his tie, not nervously but with the air of a man trying to set the stage for himself. Every small movement stretched the moment, pulling all attention toward him. Then Obama finally spoke. "You know," he began, pausing, "I've been called a lot of things in my life, but respect has never been something I had to beg for." The hall erupted. Applause thundered through the air. People leapt to their feet, clapping until their hands stung. A pastor shouted, "Amen," while Trump smirked, rolling his eyes and muttering, "Give me a break," into the mic. Obama didn't let the noise overtake him. He raised a hand slightly and the room quieted, the crowd still buzzing with energy. His pause hadn't been hesitation, it was strategy. Now, every word carried weight. Trump crossed his arms, clearly irritated, trying to cut in. But Obama didn't look at him. He looked at the audience as if reminding everyone this moment wasn't about Trump. It was bigger than him. When Obama leaned toward the mic again, the room fell into hushed anticipation. His voice was steady, almost gentle, but it struck hard. Respect isn't handed out like a trophy. It's not tied to the office you hold or the volume of your voice. Respect is earned by how you treat people, by the example you set when no one's watching, and most of all, by how well you listen. The applause crashed back, drowning out the sound of Trump's jaw tightening. Obama let it ride out, calm as ever. Then he turned his gaze back to Trump. "Mr. President," he said, "I've been called many things in my life, some by people who didn't know me, some by people who didn't want to. But here's what I learned long ago. When people resort to insults, it says more about their fear than it does about your worth." The audience murmured sharply, the words cutting deeper for their calm delivery. Trump grabbed his mic and snapped, "Don't lecture me about respect, Barack. I'm the President of the United States." His tone was loud but shaky, as though he was fighting to hold on to a room that had already slipped away. Obama didn't flinch. He let the words hang, then answered softly, "Yes, you are. And that's exactly why every word you speak carries weight. The title doesn't make you bigger than the people you serve. It should remind you that your duty is to carry yourself in a way worthy of their trust." The hall erupted. Applause, whistles, even feet stomping. The moderator tried to calm the crowd, though he couldn't hide the small smile tugging at his lips. Obama leaned in once more. "You can demand someone sit down. You can try to shrink them with words, but the truth is, respect doesn't bow to commands. Respect comes when you stand for something greater than yourself," Obama said. A woman in a red blazer shot to her feet and shouted, "Say that again." The hall erupted in cheers. Obama smiled briefly, then went on. "We teach our children that the measure of a person isn't how much power they can grab, but how they use the power they've been given. We tell them to be fair, to be honest, to lift people up, not tear them down. Those lessons are simple, but they mean everything when you're trusted to lead a nation." Trump leaned in, cutting him off. "Oh, please. You think lectures make you great? People didn't elect me to give sermons. They elected me to fight." Obama turned to him, calm but firm. "You're right. They didn't elect you to give sermons. They elected you to lead. And there's a difference. Fighting for yourself isn't leadership. Fighting for people who don't look like you, who don't pray like you, who don't agree with you, that's leadership." The hall shook with applause. Even some Republicans clapped, swept up in the moment. Cameras caught a young Latina student wiping away a tear, and an older veteran clapping slowly, his eyes locked on the stage. Obama leaned forward, lowering his voice to a near whisper. The most powerful thing a leader can say isn't "sit down." It's "stand up with me." That's the difference. The ovation thundered back, rolling in waves. People rose from their seats, chanting, cheering, stomping their feet. On the left side, young activists stood and echoed Obama's words, "Stand up with me," turning them into an instant rallying cry. But not everyone was cheering. In the back rows, Trump supporters waved MAGA hats. A man in a Build the Wall shirt yelled, "Sit down, Obama, you had your time." His voice was swallowed quickly, but the tension was clear. The room had split into two sides of a battle. Reporters scribbled furiously, each already framing their headline. One journalist whispered, "This isn't just a forum anymore. This is going to shape the news for weeks." Down front, Reverend Harold Gaines pressed a hand to his chest, tears in his eyes. "That's dignity they can't strip from us," he whispered. 2 rows back, a Republican governor leaned forward and muttered to his aide, "He's making sense. And that scares me." On stage, the contrast was stark. Trump sat back with his arms crossed, fingers drumming loudly against the desk, irritation bleeding through the mic. Beside him, Obama's hands stayed folded, his eyes sweeping the room like a teacher making sure the lesson had landed. The moderator tried again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's keep this civil." His voice cracked, nearly lost, in the roar of cheers and shouts. But the crowd wasn't calming down. A college student from Arizona State shouted toward the stage, "Respect isn't about power, it's about character." Applause rippled through the hall, only to be met by a Trump supporter yelling back, "We don't need lectures, we need fighters." The clash of voices echoed like a symbol of the larger divide cutting through the country. Fox News zoomed in on a young black girl clutching her mother's hand, her wide eyes caught between fear and awe. The image would later flood social media. CNN, meanwhile, stayed focused on Obama's steady expression, a stark contrast to Trump's rising frustration. 2 networks, 2 Americas, framed in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen, please." The moderator tried again, but his words dissolved into the chaos. The forum had stopped being a discussion. It had become raw emotion spilling into the open. Trump snapped into his mic. "This isn't supposed to be a pep rally for Obama. I'm the president here, not him." His words boomed, but instead of an applause, a chorus of boos rolled across the room. Obama didn't rush to respond. He simply turned his head toward Trump with that same calm stare. The audience took it as strength, and the applause returned louder than ever. Security guards by the exits shifted uneasily, ready for anything. The room felt charged. Not violent, but electric, like a stadium split between rival teams. And beneath the noise, one truth was clear. This wasn't just about 2 men, it was about 2 competing visions of leadership. For some, power meant force and domination. For others, it meant patience, dignity, and restraint. The cameras captured it all. The anger, the cheers, the tears, the frustration. Millions at home weren't just watching a debate, they were seeing a reflection of America itself, divided, loud, and unable to look away. But the real storm was outside. The media and social platforms were already amplifying the clash across every screen in the nation. By the time the event ended, the Phoenix night glowed with camera lights and satellite trucks. Reporters swarmed the sidewalks, shoving microphones forward to capture reactions from attendees spilling out of the hall. CNN's Jake Tapper stood live just outside the doors. What we witnessed tonight wasn't just political, it was cultural. A clash of words that's already dominating every platform you can imagine. Across the street, Fox News' Laura Ingraham countered under her own bright lights, "This is being blown out of proportion." President Trump was simply speaking, directly, as he always does. The left is trying to twist it into something racial. Over on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow shook her head as clips played behind her. "You cannot ignore the weight of those words. "Sit down, boy." That was no slip. And Barack Obama's calm, dignified response only highlighted the difference between these two men. Inside Twitter's headquarters, moderators scrambled. The hashtag #RockerSitDownBoy shot to the top of US trends and was climbing toward #1 globally. Just beneath it, another tag was surging. "Here, stand up. With me." Obama's own words, already turned into a rallying cry. Clips of the exchange spread like wildfire. A student's balcony video, capturing the collective gasp of the crowd, hit 3 million. Views on TikTok within an hour. CNN's own clip of Obama leaning into the mic was racing across timelines just as fast. Obama's line about respect spread like wildfire, retweeted over 200,000 times in just half an hour. Then came the memes. Screenshots of Trump's crossed arms and sour expression appeared with captions like, "When the teacher calls you out in front of the whole class." Obama's calm stare was paired with quotes like, "Leadership doesn't yell, it teaches." But the frenzy wasn't limited to social media. Evening newscasts across the country scrambled to lead with the Phoenix story. In Arizona, local Channel 12 cut away from weather coverage to replay the clash. In Boston, WBZ opened its 11 p.m. broadcast with the clip. Tonight, a moment in Arizona that has the entire country talking, the anchor intoned. Late-night hosts pounced, too. Jimmy Kimmel showed the footage to an audience that gasped, then erupted in cheers at Obama's words. "I haven't seen someone get roasted that calmly since my mother told me I was a mistake," he joked. Stephen Colbert called it not a comeback, but a masterclass in leadership. Meanwhile, faith leaders, teachers, and community organizers filled Facebook with posts about what the moment symbolized. Reverend Lisa Harmon from Indianapolis wrote, "Obama reminded us that a leader's strength isn't in tearing others down, but in showing restraint. That's what our children need to see." Her post was shared more than 40,000 times overnight. Conservative media fired back. Breitbart splashed the headline, "Obama plays victim again." Mainstream media cheers. On Fox, Sean Hannity told, "Ye viewers, the left is trying to crown Obama a saint while ignoring the real issues. The president is a fighter, and fighters don't mince words." Still, the clip was unavoidable. Whether on CNN, Instagram, or local ABC affiliates, the same moment played again and again. Trump saying, "Sit down, boy." Obama straightening his jacket, then replying with words sharper than any insult. By 1 a.m. Eastern, Twitter's trending bar looked like a battlefield. Yuga Obama response, "Shida respect, I cerned, Idak stand up, with me, Didak Presidential Forum." Analysts estimated more than 50 million people had already seen the exchange. By morning, front pages carried the story coast to coast. The Washington Post led with, "Respect versus power, Obama silences Trump with words." The Wall Street Journal. It ran, "Forum sparks political firestorm as Obama, Trump clash." The Los Angeles Times stripped it down to the quote itself, "Sit down, boy." The moment had escaped Phoenix. It was in living rooms, on phones, and in every conversation across America. The story no longer belonged to the politicians, it belonged to the people. But behind closed doors, the fallout was just beginning. Inside the White House residence that night, the mood was tense. Trump paced the Lincoln sitting room, tie loosened, face red. The TV blared Fox News, where Laura Ingraham defended him with a strained tone. "They're twisting it, twisting everything," Trump barked, jabbing at the screen. "I didn't mean it like that. Fake news, blowing it up." His aides sat stiffly. Jason Wilkes, a senior advisor, cleared his throat. "Mr. President, with respect, the clip is everywhere. Social media isn't letting it go. Even some allies are struggling to spin it." Trump wheeled on him. "Struggling? That's your job. Fix it. Get Hannity, get Tucker. I want every outlet reminding people Obama was the worst president in history." The economy, the jobs, the disasters, remind them. Trump slapped his palm against the chair arm. They can't give him the win on this. Across the country, in a quiet Chicago hotel suite, Obama sat with close friends and former staff. The TV was muted, captions replaying his words line by line. Valerie Jarrett leaned forward. "Barack, that wasn't just an answer. You showed the contrast without even raising your voice." Obama rubbed the bridge of his nose, breathing slowly. "I didn't go there to spar. I went to talk about leadership, about where we're headed. But he made it about respect. And maybe that's what people needed to see." By the window, David Plouffe scrolled through his phone. "The reaction's massive, trending worldwide. Young people are repeating your line like it's a mantra, stand up with me. Honestly, I haven't seen this kind of energy since Yes We Can." Obama chuckled but shook his head. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm not running for anything. If the message sticks, if people talk about dignity and respect in their daily lives, then maybe it's worth the storm." Michelle, quiet until now, finally spoke. "It wasn't just what you said. It was how you carried yourself. You didn't let him drag you down. Families are watching this. Kids are watching. They need to see that composure matters, that leadership isn't about shouting." Meanwhile, in Washington, phones lit up. Republican senators called the White House. Publicly, they voiced support. Privately, they warned Trump to dial it back. Senator Alan Briggs of Ohio was blunt. "Mr. President, that phrase won't play well in the suburbs. You've got to walk it back, or it'll haunt you." Trump scoffed. "Walk it back? Never. That's weakness. People elected me because I don't apologize. I double down." He grabbed a pen, scrawled on a notepad. "Draft. Me, a tweet. We're not on defense. We hit back harder." Back in Chicago, Jarrett read messages flooding in. "Pastor Williams in Baltimore says he's using your words in Sunday's sermon." A teacher in Dallas posted she played the clip for her students. Even some conservative voices are saying you handled it with class. Obama leaned back, eyes distant. "This isn't about me. It's about what kind of behavior we normalize. If a president can speak like that without consequence, what lesson does it teach? Not just to adults, to kids who'll think that's what leadership looks like." Michelle nodded firmly. "That's why tonight mattered. Not for politics, for principle. Respect isn't optional. It's essential." By 2 a.m., Trump's Twitter account was firing. "Fake news, twisting my words. Obama's weak reply won't fix the disaster he left behind." His supporters retweeted furiously. But for every loyal echo, 10 more voices shared Obama's calm words with captions, like, "This is what leadership looks like." Behind closed doors, the contrast was unmistakable. Trump's camp scrambling, frantic, combative. Obama's circle steady, reflective, deliberate. They didn't have to chase the story anymore. The story was chasing them. But the true weight of the clash wasn't in spin rooms or press briefings. It was in the way ordinary Americans woke up, saw the headlines, and decided for themselves what kind of leadership they believed in. By morning, the conversation had spilled far beyond Phoenix, the White House, or Obama's Chicago suite. It was in kitchens, coffee shops, bus stops, factory floors, and classrooms across the country. People who usually avoided politics were suddenly debating dignity, respect, and what leadership should look like. In a diner off Interstate 71 in Columbus, Ohio, truckers and factory workers stared at the TV above the counter, the clip playing on a loop. One man in a worn camouflage jacket muttered, "That was cold. He didn't even have to raise his voice." A waitress chimed in as she wiped the counter. "My kids watched it this morning. They said Obama looked like a teacher scolding the TUD class, and they're right, he did it without yelling." In Dallas, a high school teacher rolled in a TV card and played the exchange for her class. Students sat in silence. When it ended, a quiet boy in the back raised his hand. Why did he call him boy? My grandpa used to say that Word was never just about being young. The teacher paused, then answered softly. That's exactly why this matters. Words matter, and leaders' words matter most of all. Detroit, Reverend Harold Gaines, who had been at the forum, preached that Sunday. His congregation leaned in as he echoed Obama's line, "Respect doesn't bow to commands." The church erupted in applause as Gaines thundered, "Dignity isn't granted by office, it's proven by character." A volunteer posted the sermon online. By nightfall, it had 2 million views. In rural Montana, a retired farmer named Clyde spoke to a local reporter outside a hardware store, a John Deere cap shading his eyes. "I never voted for Obama," he admitted, "but I'll say this. He carried himself better than I've seen in a long time." The other guy looked rattled. His honesty struck a nerve online, especially with independents tired of partisan brawls. College campuses lit up with energy. At the University of Michigan, students gathered on the quad, waving homemade signs that read, "Stand up with me." Videos of their chants spread across TikTok. "This isn't about politics," one student shouted into a bullhorn. "It's about how leaders treat people. That's the standard we should all demand." Not everyone agreed. In Alabama, a local radio host told listeners, "The media's painting Obama like a saint. Let's not forget, he's not the president, Trump is, and Trump doesn't back down." The phones lit up, some callers praising, some angry, but every single one had watched the clip. Even in workplaces far removed from politics, the debate dominated. In a steel plant in Gary, Indiana, workers argued over lunch. One man, hands still black with soot, shook his head. "I don't care who you vote for. If my boss talked to me the way Trump talked to him, I'd quit on the spot." Another shot. Back. "That's Trump. He's a fighter. People like that." The room filled with laughter, frustration, and spirited back and forths, proof that the moment had seeped into everyday life. On social media, the same story played out. Ordinary. Americans posting their own reflections, their own anger, their own hope. The clash wasn't just a headline anymore. It had become part of the national conversation. In Albuquerque, a single mother tweeted, "My 12-year-old daughter asked me why the president called Obama boy. I had to explain a history she shouldn't have to carry. Thank you, Obama, for showing her strength looks like calm." The post was shared tens of thousands of times. In Miami, Univision interviewed an elderly Cuban American outside his apartment complex. Switching between Spanish and English, he said, "Obama showed what real leadership is. Calm, dignity. That's what I want for my grandchildren." His words resonated with viewers tired of constant chaos. The reactions weren't simple or predictable. Some conservatives admitted respect for Obama's composure, while some liberals focused more on condemning Trump's remark than praising Obama's restraint. But one thread connected it all. The country was talking about words, talking about respect, talking about what leadership should look like. By Monday morning, the numbers added weight. A Snap Reuters poll found 62% of Americans, including 35% of Republicans, believed Obama had carried himself with more dignity than Trump. Washington felt the tremors immediately. Both parties scrambled to read the mood and prepare for fallout. Cable. News screens blared with chyrons, forum fallout, and respect versus power. Pundits filled studios. But the real heat was on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers were swarmed by reporters the moment they stepped onto the grounds, microphones shoved in their faces. Senator Caroline Haskins of Vermont didn't hesitate. That comment was unacceptable. Full stop. It demeaned not only President Obama but millions of Americans who saw themselves in that moment. Leadership is about lifting people up, not tearing them down. Her clip played on repeat, her voice sharp but measured. On the other side, Senator Rick Dalworth of Florida struck a defensive note. The president speaks directly, and sometimes that ruffles feathers. But the media is inflating this beyond reason. Let's focus on policies, not personalities. Still, his uneasy glance toward the cameras gave him away. He knew the clip had landed hard. In the House, younger lawmakers spoke loudest. Representative Aaliyah Brooks of Minnesota tweeted, "Respect is not optional. Every child watching that forum learned more from Obama's restraint than from Trump's outburst. We must demand better." Her post hit 1 million likes in a single day. Meanwhile, Republicans in vulnerable districts scrambled. Congressman Paul McKenna of Pennsylvania issued a carefully worded statement. "I don't agree with the phrasing used, but I continue to support the president's overall leadership." Local papers mocked it as spineless. Behind the scenes, GOP strategists panicked. A leaked RNC memo warned candidates avoid repeating or defending the president's exact phrasing. Pivot to the economy, security, or Biden criticism where possible. When Politico published the memo, it set off another firestorm. Democrats, sensing opportunity, pounced. House Speaker Linda Navarro stood on the Capitol steps flanked by civil rights leaders. "This moment goes beyond politics," she declared. "It's about the example we set for our children." President Obama showed grace. President Trump showed disrespect. The contrast could not be clearer. Her words reframed the clash as more than partisanship. It was about values and which vision of leadership America would choose. Cable news poured gasoline on the fire. CNN replayed Obama's line, "The title doesn't make you bigger than the people you serve," on an endless loop, dubbing it the quote of the decade. Fox countered with guests insisting Trump was simply asserting authority. MSNBC brought on historians who compared Obama's composure to leaders like Lincoln and Kennedy. But the real shock came when Republican senators, usually rock solid behind Trump, wavered. Senator Jonathan Keene of Arizona told reporters, "Words matter. We all know the history of that word, and it shouldn't have been used. We can back the president on policy, but we should be honest about mistakes." It was the closest thing, yet, to public criticism, and it rattled the conservative base. Advocacy groups jumped in. The NAACP praised Obama's measured response and called on Trump to apologize. Civil rights attorneys appeared on morning shows, explaining the painful legacy of the word boy in America. Even evangelical leaders were split, some defending Trump's bluntness, others, like Reverend Thomas Ellery of Tennessee, declaring, "Leadership without respect is not leadership at all." Inside the White House, panic set in. Press Secretary Dana Hollis faced a wall of questions. "The president uses plain language," she insisted. "It wasn't meant in the way some are spinning it. Let's not get distracted by sound bites." But the briefing spiraled as reporters pressed harder. Obama, meanwhile, stayed silent. No interviews, no tweets, no statements. And that silence became its own story. NBC's Chuck Todd put it plainly. The more Obama says nothing, the louder his words from that stage become. By Tuesday, late-night comedians were still riding the moment, but lawmakers were treating it as deadly serious. Committees referenced the clash in hearings. One congresswoman even quoted Obama's line on the House floor. The ripple had grown, from culture to legislation, seeping into Washington's daily grind. Yet beyond politics, the moral weight of Obama's words was sinking even deeper into schools, churches, and homes. What started as a heated exchange was now being retold as lessons about dignity and respect. At Jefferson High School in Phoenix, just miles from the forum, a teacher projected the video onto her classroom whiteboard. Students, some with relatives, who'd been in the hall that night, watched in silence. When Obama said, "Respect isn't demanded by a title, it's earned through conduct," one student scribbled it into the margin of his notebook. The teacher paused the clip. "That, right there," she told them, "is why words matter. That's leadership without shouting, without insults, just truth. In a small church in Birmingham, Reverend Miriam Tate held a Bible in one hand and her phone in the other, frozen on a still of Obama. "Brothers and sisters," she said, her voice echoing through the sanctuary, "when a man refuses to lower himself to anger, but instead calls us to rise higher, that's a lesson worth remembering. Respect doesn't bow to commands. It lives in how we carry ourselves." Her congregation rose to their feet in ovation, many of them cheering inside that sanctuary for the very first time. In Sacramento, California, a group of middle schoolers painted Obama's phrase, "Stand up with me," onto a giant banner and hung it across their cafeteria. Their principal admitted to a local reporter, "I've never seen kids take a political moment and make it their own like this. They weren't even alive when Obama was first elected, but they get it." Photos of the banner spread online, praised as proof that the message was already shaping the next generation. Even workplaces took notice. At a hospital in St. Louis, a supervisor began a staff meeting by quoting Obama's words. "Fighting. For people who don't look like you, that's leadership." Doctors and nurses nodded in agreement, trading glances that said more than words. For a brief moment, the noise of the hospital floor gave way to reflection. In rural Kansas, a farmer told NPR, "I'm not much for politics." But when Obama said, "Respect is earned," that hit home out here. You treat your neighbors right, or you won't have neighbors for long. That's just life. His plain-spoken words went viral, shared as proof the moment stretched far beyond party lines. For younger generations, the clip became content. On TikTok, teens set Obama's words to rap beats, gospel choirs, and highlight reels. One video of student-athletes training, paired with "Respect comes when you stand for something greater than yourself," racked up 10 million views in just 2 days. But the clearest proof of its impact came at dinner tables. In Milwaukee, a mother said her 9-year-old asked during supper, "Why was the president so mean to Mr. Obama?" She struggled to explain the weight of the word "boy," but told him instead, "That's what strength looks like. Calm, patient, firm." Not everyone agreed, of course. Conservative talk radio mocked the moment. An Oklahoma host sneered, "If rolling your eyes and giving a lecture is leadership, then every teacher in America should be president." But even the mockery showed its reach because they couldn't stop talking about it either. The divide was sharp, yet the message was spreading into spaces where politics rarely reached. Teachers quoted it in classrooms. Pastors wove it into sermons. Parents used it as a lesson in dignity. Young people turned it into art. The words weren't just remembered. They were sticking. By the end of the week, the noise hadn't faded. Clips still replayed on TV. Hashtags still trended. Commentators still dissected it like a turning point in history. But beyond the chatter, something deeper had settled. People weren't just repeating what Trump had said, or what Obama had answered. They were wrestling with what it meant. In Springfield, Missouri, a father sat with his teenage daughter at the kitchen table. She had just rewatched the clip on her phone. "Dad, why didn't Obama yell back? If someone said that to you, wouldn't you be mad?" He thought a moment, then said, "Sure, I'd be mad. But that's why what he did was stronger. He showed you don't have to scream to win. Sometimes calm cuts deeper." His daughter nodded slowly, the lesson sinking in. That same night in Los Angeles, community organizers held a town hall. Instead of debating housing or crime, they opened by playing Obama's words. The most powerful thing a leader can say is not "sit down," it's "stand up with me." A woman in the back stood and said softly, "That's not politics. That's a call to every one of us. That's what we need in this neighborhood, leaders who invite us in, not push us out." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in weeks, the organizers walked out feeling united around something larger than policy. In a suburban library in Wisconsin, a simple book club turned into a debate about the moment. One retiree said, "I don't agree with all of Obama's politics, but my goodness, he showed restraint. That's character." Another countered, "Trump was elected because he fights. Some people like that toughness." A third voice cut in quietly, "But fighting isn't the same as leading. That's what Obama showed us." They didn't leave in agreement, but they left thinking, and that was rare enough to matter. By Friday, even schools that usually steered clear of politics were embracing the lesson. In a fifth-grade classroom in Phoenix, students wrote about what leadership meant to them. One child's essay, shared by the teacher online, went viral. It read simply, "Leaders don't make people feel small. They make people feel tall." Meanwhile, Obama's silence became its own story. No interviews, no tweets, no TV appearances. He let his words from that stage do the work. That restraint itself became part of the lesson. Trump, by contrast, doubled down. Tweets, interviews, statements, all defiant. His base rallied, but even some admitted privately that the clash had left a mark. Historians began weighing in. One wrote in The Atlantic, "Moments like these aren't about immediate politics. They're about cultural memory. A decade from now, students will read about this, not for what it meant to Trump or Obama politically, but for what it revealed about America's struggle with respect and leadership." And that's what the moment became. Obama's words were no longer about him. They were about anyone who had ever been told to sit down, to be quiet, to accept disrespect. His response showed another way, the choice to meet insult with dignity. Leadership, after all, isn't measured by how loudly you command or how sharply you belittle. It's measured by restraint, by patience, by the ability to lift others up without shouting them down. And that night in Phoenix, in front of cameras, crowds, and millions watching from home, Obama reminded the nation of something timeless. Respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. For viewers, for citizens, for anyone who watched, the story wasn't just about two men on a stage. It was about all of us, about the examples we set for our children, about the kind of leaders we choose to follow. So, if you take anything from that moment, let it be this. Words matter. How you respond to disrespect matters even more. And sometimes, when the world tells you to sit down, the real strength is in inviting others to stand up with you. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, if it made you reflect on leadership, dignity, or the example you want to set, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories to come. Stories that matter. Stories that remind us who we are and who we can be.